The Whitmore mansion was known as a palace of perfection. White marble walls gleamed under the afternoon sun. Glass windows reflected the sky like mirrors, and every blade of grass in the massive garden was trimmed with machine-like precision. To outsiders, it was paradise. To insiders, it was a cage built with rules colder than iron. That afternoon, Mr. Whitmore, the billionaire himself, returned earlier than usual. His driver pulled up by the stone pathway, and Whitmore stepped out, adjusting his flawless navy blue suit. His polished shoes clicked softly against the path as he strolled toward the garden, the place he often came to clear his mind after ruthless board meetings. But today, clarity was the last thing he would find. At first, he noticed something odd at the far end of the lawn, a figure hunched over, kneeling in the grass. His eyebrows furrowed. He didn't recognize the shape at once, but as he walked closer, the truth came into focus and what he saw froze him in place. There, in the middle of his perfect $1,000,000 garden, was Amara, one of his maids. Her uniform was crumpled, her hands dirty, and her face streaked with tears. She wasn't cleaning. She wasn't working. She was on her knees, fists buried into the soil, and to his horror, she was shoving handfuls of grass into her mouth. For a second, Mr. Whitmore thought he had lost his mind. His lips parted, but no words came. The scene was so surreal, so unthinkable that his brain refused to accept it. A maid eating grass like an animal? Then he heard it. Soft sobs breaking through the silence. Amara's shoulders shook violently as she chewed, tears dripping into the dirt beneath her. The sound pierced him deeper than any business betrayal, deeper than any financial loss he had ever endured. His voice finally broke free, sharp and trembling. "What the hell is this?" Amara froze like a guilty child. The green strand slipped from her lips as she tried to cover her mouth with trembling hands. But the evidence was clear. Grass still clung to the corners of her lips. Shame painted her cheeks scarlet. "Amara?" Mr. Whitmore's voice cracked. Disbelief and anger tangled together. He stepped forward, each stride heavier than the last. "What are you doing?" She scrambled back on her knees, stammering. "Sir, I..." But the words died in her throat. "You're eating grass?" His tone rose, harsh and sharp, but beneath it was something else. Fear. Confusion. "Are you insane? Why are you humiliating yourself like this?" Amara lowered her head so far that her chin nearly touched her chest. Her hands twisted into her apron, her whole body trembling. Tears streamed silently, soaking into the earth. "Answer me." His voice boomed through the garden, bouncing off the mansion walls. "Why?" But no answer came. The silence was deafening. The birds in the trees stopped singing. Even the breeze seemed to die in that moment. Mr. Whitmore's heart thudded violently in his chest, the weight of the scene pressing down on him like a storm. He had seen scandals. He had faced enemies in the business world. He had survived betrayals worth billions of dollars. But nothing compared to the sight of his maid chewing grass like a starving animal in the shadow of his fortune. "Amara," he said again, softer this time, almost begging. "I need to know the truth. Tell me." Her lips quivered, but still she shook her head. The fear in her eyes was stronger than hunger, stronger than shame. Something or someone was holding her back, and that silence was more terrifying than any answer. Amara's lips trembled, but no sound left her mouth. She couldn't speak, not with Mr. Whitmore's eyes drilling into her soul, not with the weight of her mistress's threat still echoing in her mind. Her silence was louder than screams, and so, while the billionaire waited for answers, Amara's mind drifted back into the endless days and nights of quiet hunger that had led her here. The Whitmore mansion sparkled with perfection. Chandeliers glistened, marble floors gleamed, and polished silver lined the dinner tables like trophies. Every evening, platters of roasted meat, fresh bread, and golden desserts filled the dining room. But while the family feasted, the servants were banished from even touching a crumb. "Remember the rule." Mrs. Whitmore's cold voice rang in Amara's memory. The billionaire's wife had stood in the kitchen doorway the day she was hired, her silk robe brushing the polished tiles. No food, not leftovers, not crumbs. Servants bring their own bread. "Do you understand?" Amara had bowed her head, whispering, "Yes, ma'am," and from that day she obeyed. But wages were small, and every coin she earned was sent home. Back to the little village where her sick son lay in bed, waiting for medicine that cost more than she could ever afford. Amara's meals were reduced to scraps of bread, sometimes none at all. She worked on an empty stomach, scrubbing floors, polishing banisters, ironing the billionaire's perfect suits while her own body grew weaker, thinner, more fragile. For days, she starved in silence. Her hands shook as she polished glasses. Her vision blurred as she scrubbed tiles. Her body cried out for food, but her lips remained sealed. To complain meant punishment. To disobey meant losing her job. And to lose this job meant her child's death. So she endured, until today. By noon, her stomach twisted into knots so sharp she could barely breathe. She had dusted the chandelier, her knees wobbling. She had carried laundry up the long staircase, her vision swimming. And when she tried to serve coffee in the kitchen, the smell alone nearly broke her. That's when Mrs. Whitmore caught her again. "Don't even think about it," the mistress hissed, eyes narrowed like knives. "You think I don't see you eyeing the bread? Touch it and you're finished." Amara had lowered her head, whispering, "Yes, ma'am," as her throat burned with unshed tears, and then she fled. Her legs carried her into the garden, where sunlight bathed the endless stretch of perfect grass. She collapsed onto her knees, clutching her stomach. I can't anymore," she whispered, tears spilling. The hunger clawed at her ribs, louder than Mrs. Whitmore's threats, sharper than her own shame. In a moment of desperation, her trembling hands tore at the blades of grass. She shoved them into her mouth, the bitterness scraping her tongue. Tears mixed with the dirt as she chewed, as if the earth itself had become her only meal. Every bite was humiliation, every swallow an act of survival. "God," she cried into the soil, "why am I like this? Why?" Her sobs echoed across the garden, unnoticed by anyone, until the sound of footsteps crushed the silence. And when she looked up, she saw him, Mr. Whitmore, towering in his flawless suit, eyes wide with horror, staring at her as though his world had collapsed. Back in the present, Amara's chest rose and fell with panicked breaths. Her lips were dry, her eyes swollen, but still she kept her head down. She couldn't tell him. She couldn't betray the mistress. If she spoke, she would lose the only wages keeping her son alive. And so she stayed silent, grass still clinging to her lips, trembling under the billionaire's burning gaze. Mr. Whitmore's chest heaved as he stood over the trembling maid. His shadow stretched across the lawn, swallowing Amara's frail figure whole. "Speak," he thundered again, his voice echoing through the garden. "Tell me why you're eating grass in my house like some starving animal." But Amara kept her head bowed, tears dripping into the soil. Her lips parted as if to answer, but fear sealed her words shut. "Amara," his voice dropped lower. Dangerous now, a storm waiting to erupt. "Do not test me. I don't want excuses. I want the truth." Her hands twisted tighter into her apron, her shoulders trembling. Shame and fear held her captive. She wanted to vanish, to melt into the ground beneath her. Why? His voice cracked, disbelief woven into his anger. "Why would you do this?" Her silence was like a knife. The billionaire's jaw clenched. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. Powerless in his own garden, powerless in his own house. He had built empires, crushed rivals, signed deals worth billions, but in this moment, standing over his maid who refused to speak, he felt like nothing. "Answer me, damn it." His fists tightened at his sides. "If you don't tell me the truth, I will—" He stopped himself, his throat closing. What could he even say? Fire her? Threaten her? She was already broken, already humiliated, sir. Amara finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Her lips quivered, her chest rising in shallow, panicked breaths. "Please, don't ask me." That single sentence sliced through him. "Don't ask you," he repeated, his voice shaking. He bent lower, forcing his gaze to meet her swollen eyes. "I just caught you humiliating yourself in my garden and you expect me to look away?" "No, Amara, I won't. I want answers. I deserve answers." Her sobs grew harsher, but still she shook her head violently. If I say it, she will—" "She?" His voice sharpened instantly. "Who is she? Who did this to you?" Before Amara could respond, the sound of a sliding glass door broke the tension. Creak. The billionaire straightened instantly, his chest tightening as his wife stepped barefoot onto the stone patio. Mrs. Whitmore, wrapped in her flowing silk robe, held a porcelain coffee cup in her hand as if she had stepped out of another world. Untouched. Perfect. Cold. Her eyes narrowed, landing on the scene before her, her husband looming over the maid. The maid kneeling in the dirt with grass clinging to her lips, her voice, calm but laced with disdain, sliced through the silence. "What is going on here?" Amara flinched violently, her body stiffening like prey sensing a predator. Mr. Whitmore turned toward his wife, his jaw tightening, fury trembling beneath his skin. He pointed a shaking hand toward the maid. "Explain to me," he said, his voice trembling with both shock and rage, "why I just found our maid on the ground eating grass." Mrs. Whitmore didn't blink. She didn't look embarrassed or ashamed or even surprised. Instead, she rolled her eyes faintly and lifted her coffee to her lips, sipping slowly before answering. "Because she's a servant," she said flatly. "And servants don't eat what belongs to us." The billionaire's face drained of color. "What did you just say?" She walked closer, her robe flowing behind her like a dark shadow. Her tone was sharp, dismissive, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "I told her from the beginning. The staff are not allowed to touch our food. Not leftovers, not crumbs. They are here to serve, not to feed themselves like parasites." Amara's head dropped lower, hot tears burning her cheeks. Mr. Whitmore stared at his wife as though seeing her for the first time. His chest rose sharply, his hand trembling at his side. "You mean to tell me you've been forbidding them to eat in my house?" Mrs. Whitmore scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't be dramatic. They're paid wages. If they're too stupid to bring their own bread, that's their problem. I will not have servants rummaging through my refrigerator like rats. This house has standards." "Standards?" His voice cracked, the word dripping with disbelief. "You call this cruelty standards? She was starving to the point of chewing grass in our garden." His voice rose, trembling with fury now. "And you watched it happen." Mrs. Whitmore's expression hardened. She set her coffee cup down on the stone ledge, her chin lifting arrogantly. "Don't you dare raise your voice at me. You're never here. You bury yourself in your work and leave this house to me. I kept order. If she's hungry, let her figure it out. That's not my problem." The billionaire's throat closed. He turned back to Amara, who sat frozen in the dirt, her frail body hunched, her lips pressed together in terror. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly now, desperation breaking through his fury. Amara shook her head violently, sobbing. "Because, sir," she said, "if I complained, I'd be thrown out, and I send all my wages back home. My son is sick. If I lose this job..." Her voice cracked completely. "He won't survive." The billionaire staggered back a step, his breath leaving his lungs in a painful rush. His world tilted. His maid wasn't insane. She wasn't weak. She wasn't foolish. She was starving in silence to keep her child alive, while scraps of food were tossed into the trash under his own roof. His gaze swung back to his wife, fire burning in his eyes. "Do you hear that?" His voice roared like thunder, shaking the air. "She's been starving under our roof while you threw food away. Do you even realize what you've done?" But Mrs. Whitmore's jaw tightened. Her tone was venom, sharp enough to cut steel. "Don't turn this into some melodrama. She's just a maid. They come and go. Don't act like she matters more than she does." That was it. The billionaire snapped. His roar shook the garden, silencing even the birds in the trees. Don't you dare speak another word. Not one more. I don't even recognize the woman standing in front of me. Heartless, cruel, inhuman." Mrs. Whitmore's lips parted as if to protest, but the look in his eyes froze her tongue. The garden was silent once more. But this time, it was the silence of war. The silence after his roar was deafening. Even the birds, startled, had fled the trees. The immaculate garden, once a picture of perfection, now felt like a battlefield. Mr. Whitmore's chest rose and fell like a man gasping for breath after drowning. His fists trembled at his sides, his eyes locked on the woman he once thought he knew. Mrs. Whitmore, however, stood her ground. Her face was cold, her chin lifted, her lips pursed as if she were the victim of his outrage. She folded her arms, silk robe glimmering in the sunlight, and spoke with venomous calm. "Enough of this drama. You're embarrassing yourself and me in front of the staff." "Embarrassing?" His voice cracked. He took a shaky step closer, his finger trembling as he pointed at her. "You call this embarrassing? What I just saw wasn't a spectacle, it was cruelty. Inhuman cruelty. You starved her. In our house. Under our roof. While we dined like kings." Mrs. Whitmore rolled her eyes, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, please. Don't act like this is some tragedy. She's a servant. You pay her. If she's too weak to manage her own hunger, that's her fault, not mine." Her words hit him like a dagger. He staggered back a step, pressing a trembling hand against his forehead. He felt dizzy, his vision blurring with rage and disbelief. "She's not an object," he whispered, his voice breaking. "She's not something you can command, starve, or discard. She's a human being. Do you even understand what that means anymore?" Amara sobbed harder, still kneeling in the grass. Her frail shoulders shook with every breath, her hands clutching her apron so tightly her knuckles turned white. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the soil beneath her. But the billionaire's voice anchored her, raw and desperate. He turned to her, his expression crumbling. His eyes glistened as he crouched down, lowering himself onto the grass beside her. For the first time in years, the man who ruled skyscrapers and empires found himself kneeling. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was barely above a whisper now, laced with guilt so heavy it dragged each word down. "Why, Amara? Why did you suffer in silence?" Her lips quivered. She shook her head slowly. "Because, sir," her voice broke. "She said if I complained I'd be thrown out, and I send all my wages back home. My son, he's sick. He needs medicine. If I lose this job..." Her voice shattered into sobs. "He won't survive." The words stabbed him deeper than any blade. He staggered as if struck, his hand covering his mouth. For years he had prided himself on being a protector, a provider, a man of vision who controlled every corner of his world. But here, under his very roof, a loyal maid had been reduced to eating grass, all because she was trying to save her child. He turned slowly, his gaze locking onto his wife. His voice trembled, but it was laced with fury so sharp it cut the air. "Do you hear that?" he roared, pointing toward Amara, who wept into her hands. "She starved in silence to keep her child alive, while you threw food away. Do you even comprehend the cruelty of what you've done?" Mrs. Whitmore's face hardened. Her lips curled into a sneer. "You're letting a servant manipulate you. They're clever, these people, always spinning sob stories to get sympathy." "Don't let her... Stop!" The billionaire's roar cracked like thunder, his face twisted in raw fury. "Not another word. Not one more heartless word from your mouth." His voice shook so violently the porcelain cup in her hand rattled. She froze, silenced not by guilt but by the ferocity in his eyes. He turned back to Amara, lowering himself fully to his knees now. His hand hovered awkwardly, ashamed to touch her yet desperate to comfort. "Forgive me," he whispered, his voice breaking completely. "Forgive me for not seeing, for being blind, for letting this happen under my own roof. I thought I ruled a perfect household, but I was blind to the suffering hidden within it." Amara sobbed harder, her frail body shaking, but she didn't move away. Tears welled in his own eyes. For the first time in decades, the billionaire, the man who had crushed rivals, commanded rooms, and built an empire, felt powerless. And it broke him. His shoulders sagged. His throat tightened. A single tear slid down his cheek. All the money, all the power, all the perfection. He shook his head, his voice trembling. "It means nothing. Nothing. When a woman in my home is forced to eat grass like an animal." He lifted his face to the sky, his chest heaving with grief. "What kind of man have I become?" The mansion loomed behind him, no longer a palace but a monument to blindness. Slowly, he reached out, gently lifting Amara's chin so her tear-soaked eyes met his. His own eyes shimmered with a vow, steady and unbreakable. "This ends today," he whispered fiercely. "You will never go hungry again. Not while I have breath in my body. Do you hear me?" "Never again," Amara's lips trembled. She nodded faintly, though her tears didn't stop. He rose to his feet, towering once more. But this time, not as a cold billionaire, not as a man of wealth, but as a man of conscience. His gaze locked onto his wife, his voice deep and final. "This cruelty ends today. In this house, in this family, in my life, and it ends now." Mrs. Whitmore's face paled for the first time. Her lips parted, but no words came. The look in his eyes silenced her more effectively than any argument. The garden fell silent again. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the perfect lawn. But perfection no longer mattered, because in that moment the mighty billionaire broke. Not from scandal, not from business losses, but from the unbearable truth of the suffering that had been hidden in plain sight. And for the first time his tears fell not for himself, but for another. The mansion garden, once a symbol of perfection, now felt like a courtroom where truth was finally on trial. Mr. Whitmore stood tall, his jaw tight, his chest heaving, and his eyes burning with a fire his wife had never seen before. For the first time, silence weighed heavier on Mrs. Whitmore than diamonds around her neck. Her husband's voice, shaking with fury but sharp as a blade, still echoed in her ears. This cruelty ends. Today. She forced a laugh, brittle and hollow, trying to regain control. Really, Harold, she sneered, using his name with mock familiarity. You've lost perspective. You're letting a servant's theatrics turn this into some melodrama. She knows her place. You should too. Her arrogance fueled his rage. He took a step toward her, eyes blazing. Her place? His voice thundered. Her place is not in the dirt, chewing grass like an animal. Her place is not to starve while we throw food away. Her place, he pointed to Amara, still sobbing quietly on her knees, is as a human being under this roof. And as long as I live, no human being in my house will ever be treated like this again. Mrs. Whitmore's smirk faltered, but she straightened her shoulders, clinging to her cold authority. You're overreacting. She's a maid. Replace her if you must, but don't humiliate yourself by bowing to her. It's pathetic. The billionaire's voice dropped low, more dangerous than any roar. Pathetic is watching a woman starve in my house and doing nothing. Pathetic is calling cruelty standards. Pathetic is the heartless creature you've become. The words hit harder than any slap. For the first time, Mrs. Whitmore's confident mask cracked. Her lips parted, but no words came. Whitmore turned away from her, his gaze softening as it fell on Amara. Slowly, he knelt down again, his expensive suit brushing against the dirt without hesitation. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp white handkerchief, pressing it gently into Amara's trembling hands. Wipe your tears, he whispered. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing. Amara's fingers shook as she clutched the fabric. Her voice cracked, broken. Sir, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, he replied softly. You've said enough with your silence. I was blind, but now I see. And I swear to you, from this moment forward, you will never feel hunger in this house again. Tears blurred her vision. She had expected punishment, humiliation, perhaps even dismissal. But compassion, a promise, it felt unreal. The billionaire rose again, his figure towering not in arrogance but in conviction. He turned toward the sliding glass doors and called out, his voice booming. Samuel? Within moments, the family's butler appeared, startled by the unusual commotion. Yes, sir. Prepare the dining room. Now, Whitmore ordered firmly, bring out the finest meal we have, and make sure Amara eats first. The butler froze, blinking in disbelief. For years, the rule had been iron. No servant touched the family's food. Now the master himself was shattering it. Yes, sir, Samuel stammered, hurrying inside. Mrs. Whitmore's face turned red with outrage. You can't be serious, she hissed. Feeding her at our table? Are you out of your mind? Mr. Whitmore's eyes narrowed, his voice cold as steel. No, Eleanor. For the first time, I'm in my right mind. This house has lived under your cruelty for too long. Not anymore. You'll regret this, she snapped. No, he replied, his voice steady. The only thing I regret is not seeing the truth sooner. He extended his hand toward Amara, gently helping her to her feet. She hesitated, but the firmness in his eyes gave her strength. Slowly, shakily, she stood. You are not less than us, he told her firmly. You are not invisible. You are not worthless. And today in this house you will sit at the table as a human being, not as a shadow. Amara's lips parted in disbelief. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not since she had left her village. Not since she had become a servant in grand homes where dignity was stripped from the poor like dust brushed off the floor. Mrs. Whitmore, trembling with fury, spat out, You're destroying the order of this house. Do you want the servants to believe they're equal to us? Do you want chaos? Yes, Mr. Whitmore replied, his voice calm but unyielding. If equality is chaos, then let there be chaos. Because order built on cruelty is nothing but rot. The words silenced her. For once, she had no retort. He placed a gentle hand on Amara's shoulder. Come, he said softly, guiding her toward the mansion. You've suffered enough. Tonight you will eat, and tomorrow everything changes. As they walked toward the house, Mrs. Whitmore remained frozen on the patio, her hands clenched, her face pale with shock. The control she once wielded like a weapon had slipped through her fingers. Inside, Samuel and the kitchen staff moved quickly, confusion painted across their faces. They had lived under Mrs. Whitmore's rules for so long that this sudden shift felt like a dream. But the master's orders were clear, and his fury had left no room for disobedience. By the time Amara stepped into the grand dining room, the table was already set. Silver platters gleamed with roasted chicken, steaming vegetables, golden bread, and rich soups. The smell alone nearly brought her to tears. "Sit," Mr. Whitmore commanded gently. Her knees wobbled. "Sir, I can't sit at the table." "Yes, you can," he said firmly, pulling out a chair for her. "Tonight you eat not as a servant, but as someone who matters." The staff exchanged glances, their eyes wide. Some hid small smiles of hope, as if for the first time light had broken through years of darkness. Amara lowered herself into the chair, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. For a moment she didn't know whether to laugh, sob, or pray. Her hands trembled as Samuel placed a plate in front of her. Mr. Whitmore sat opposite her, watching quietly, his own appetite gone. For him, the true feast was not on the table, but in the sight of justice finally served. Mrs. Whitmore appeared in the doorway, her face twisted in rage and disbelief. She wanted to scream, to demand, to undo everything, but one look at her husband's eyes, steady, unbreakable, aflame with righteous fury, kept her silent. For the first time in years, Mr. Whitmore had reclaimed his house. Not with wealth, not with power, but with humanity. And in that moment, as Amara lifted the first bite of real food she had tasted in days, the billionaire knew true perfection was never in flawless gardens or golden walls. It was in compassion, in dignity, in justice. The clinking of silver cutlery echoed in the vast dining hall, but it wasn't the usual sound of lavish dinners. Tonight the rhythm was different. Tonight it was the sound of change. Amara sat at the long oak table, her back stiff, her trembling hands resting on the edge of the plate before her. She could barely believe what was happening. The roasted chicken glistened before her. The steam rising from freshly baked bread carried an aroma that almost broke her into fresh sobs. For so long she had scrubbed this table, polished these plates, and cleared away untouched leftovers, but never once had she imagined herself sitting here, allowed to eat. Her eyes flickered to Mr. Whitmore seated across from her. His gaze wasn't the cold, distant look she had grown accustomed to. Instead, it was steady, warm, though heavy with guilt. He didn't touch his own plate. Instead, he waited, watching her as though ensuring she truly believed she was allowed to eat. "Go on," he whispered gently. "Eat, Amara." Her fingers shook as she picked up the spoon. The first bite of soup touched her lips, and the taste of real food, warm, rich, comforting, flooded her mouth. Tears spilled instantly down her cheeks. She tried to hold them back, but it was no use. She broke down sobbing as she ate. The other servants watched silently from the doorway, their faces a mixture of shock and awe. They had lived under the same cruel rule, never daring to so much as taste a crumb. For them, Amara at the table wasn't just one maid eating. It was the shattering of chains they had thought unbreakable. One of the younger maids, clutching a tray to her chest, whispered under her breath, "Is this real? Or am I dreaming?" Mr. Whitmore turned his head sharply toward them. "None of you are dreaming," he said firmly, his voice carrying through the hall. "From this day forward, every servant in this house will be treated with dignity. You will not starve while we waste. You will not be invisible. This house will no longer be ruled by cruelty, but by justice." The staff exchanged stunned glances. Some lowered their eyes, overcome by emotion, while others blinked back tears. For the first time, they felt seen. In the corner of the room, Mrs. Whitmore lingered like a shadow. Her face was pale with fury, but she said nothing. The fire in her husband's eyes had silenced her completely. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that her grip on the household had slipped away. Mr. Whitmore ignored her presence. His focus remained on Amara, who slowly began to eat with trembling determination. Each bite seemed to put color back into her cheeks, each swallow a small victory over the humiliation she had endured. But inside the billionaire's chest, a storm still raged. Every crunch of bread in her mouth echoed like thunder in his mind, reminding him of the countless times she must have gone hungry while food rotted in the kitchen bins. He pictured her sick child waiting miles away, unaware that his mother was starving herself just to send him money. Guilt dug deeper into him, heavier than any business failure he had ever faced. How had he been so blind? He had built skyscrapers, negotiated deals, doubled fortunes, and yet within the walls of his own home, cruelty had thrived unchecked. He had measured his success in numbers, in stock markets, in assets, but never in humanity. And now, seeing Amara eat grass, seeing her finally take food at his table, he understood. His wealth meant nothing if it was built on silence and suffering. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The staff flinched, uncertain, but his voice came strong, steady, filled with resolve. "Hear me," he declared, his words slicing through the hall. "From this moment, there will be no more hunger in this house. Not for you, not for anyone who serves here. Your dignity matters. Your lives matter, and if anyone dares to tell you otherwise..." His eyes flickered briefly but sharply toward his wife. "They answer to me." The staff straightened, their fear slowly replaced with something new, hope. A spark they had not felt in years lit in their hearts. Amara put her spoon down, covering her mouth with trembling hands as more tears fell. "Sir," she whispered, "I don't have words. I never thought I..." He stepped closer to her, his voice softening. "You don't need words, Amara. You've carried enough pain. Tonight you eat. Tomorrow we talk about your son. And after that, things will be different, I promise you." Her sobs grew, but this time they weren't from despair. They were from relief, from the sudden, impossible weight lifting off her chest. In the corner, Mrs. Whitmore finally turned on her heel, storming away, her robes sweeping across the floor like a dying flame. Her power was gone, and she knew it. The servant stood frozen, staring at the master who had just torn down the cruelest rule of the mansion. For them, it was the beginning of a new life. For Amara, it was the first taste of dignity after years of silence. And for Mr. Whitmore, it was the beginning of his own transformation, from a man who measured wealth in gold, to one who finally understood the priceless value of compassion. That night, as the mansion lights glowed against the dark sky, a new kind of brightness spread within those walls, not the shine of polished marble or crystal chandeliers, but the light of justice finally breaking through. The mansion was quiet that night. Too quiet. The chandeliers still glittered, the marble floors still shone, but something in the air had changed forever. Amara sat at the long dining table, her plate finally empty. For the first time in days, her stomach no longer twisted with hunger. Instead, it felt warm, heavy, and full, but not just with food, but with relief. Her tears had slowed, though her eyes were still red and swollen. She sat in disbelief, wondering if this night had been a dream. Mr. Whitmore stood near the tall windows, staring out into the garden where the unthinkable had happened just hours before. The same perfect grass that had once been a symbol of beauty now carried a haunting memory, the image of his maid on her knees, chewing it like an animal. The thought tore at him. He turned slowly, his eyes softening as they fell on Amara. He stepped closer, his voice low, steady, and raw. "Amara," he said, "from tonight, you are no longer invisible in this house. You are no longer voiceless. You are no longer just a maid. You are a human being, and you will be treated as one." Her lips trembled. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. Because your silence, your suffering, that opened my eyes. You showed me what I failed to see. And for that, I will spend the rest of my days making it right." In the shadows of the doorway, the staff watched quietly, hope shining in their eyes. For them, tonight wasn't just Amara's victory. It was a promise that their days of silent hunger were finally over. Mrs. Whitmore, however, had vanished to her room, her pride shattered. For years she had ruled with cold cruelty, but tonight her empire had crumbled. The look in her husband's eyes had made it clear. Her reign of fear was finished. Mr. Whitmore placed a hand gently on the back of Amara's chair. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll send for a doctor. Your son will get the treatment he needs. And as for you," he paused, his voice heavy with emotion, "you'll never have to starve in silence again. Not while I draw breath." Amara broke into sobs again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. She bowed her head, whispering prayers under her breath, prayers she thought would never be answered. The billionaire straightened, his shoulders heavy but his heart lighter than it had ever been. For the first time, he felt wealth not in his bank accounts, but in compassion. He realized that power was not about commanding rooms or building empires. It was about protecting those too weak to protect themselves. As the night deepened, he turned once more toward the garden, his mind replaying the unbearable sight that had shattered him, and he vowed silently to himself, never again. Because in the end, it wasn't market crashes, rivals, or scandals that broke the mighty billionaire. It was the unbearable truth of cruelty hidden in his own home. And as he stood in the silence of his mansion, one question lingered, not for himself, but for the world beyond his walls.